Hey, do you remember this? Well, what if it looked like this? It's easy to accept upgrades of things that looked bad originally, but what would a remake of Dragon Ball even look like where everything is replaced, and would fans even accept that? Dragon Ball Daima is bursting onto our screens weekly, and with that first episode came a substantial and gorgeously faithful reanimated recap of the Buu arc. You've no doubt seen screenshots at this point of the episode all over social media, but what caught my eye was the public's reaction to it. In spite of just how iconic the original anime was, fans welcomed this reimagining with open arms. That almost never happens, particularly with a series as iconic and nostalgic as Dragon Ball. We've seen time and time again that the warm embrace of something familiar can be difficult to let go of for the sake of accuracy, and you need look no further than Dragon Ball or Sailor Moon's broken colors as evidence for this. Despite boasting these questionable color palettes due to the degrading film reels, many fans really struggled to accept that what they'd been looking at all these years did not reflect the original artist's intent or even what was broadcast originally on television. But here's Daima. A totally different art style, totally different colorwork, framing, direction, the works. And it's been 100% accepted by virtually every fan, from the most casual to the most hardcore. And I think that's because we're all aware that a long-running show like Dragon Ball didn't always look the best at times. But it goes even deeper than that, and that's what I want to explore today, by reanimating Akira Toriyama's manga with this very fresh approach. The man behind Daima's new look has specifically expressed an interest in reanimating the entire Dragon Ball series from scratch, with Daima acting as this fascinating new proof of concept that fans are all on board with. We on the channel started to wonder, what aspects of Dragon Ball Z's anime could be improved? What would a Dragon Ball remake look like with this approach? And how do you begin to transfer the pages of a manga to a new animated medium? To answer all of this, I've gathered my Art Avengers once again, shackled them to their desk, and I asked them to recreate the magnificence of Daima's opening scenes with a whole array of manga panels. How did they do? Time to find out. Take your chance, big now, my So, here's a riddle for you. What do you get when you ask artists with no experience in animation to animate Dragon Ball's manga? The answer? Suffering! But that's a spoiler for later. Before the actual animating started, we first needed to choose which of Dragon Ball's thousands of panels would get this T&M Daima treatment. Ultimately, we concluded that while the original anime did adapt a lot of the manga faithfully, there were also significant sections where they did not. The reasons for these creative deviations in adaptation usually range from directorial preference all the way to simply not being suited to the new animated format. In my case, I chose one of my favorite scenes to readapt, and that scene was Some of you might remember this as the, quote, "I am" speech from the old English dub, but in truth, this is the moment where Goku proclaims that he is the Super Saiyan, much to Frieza's terror. The anime frames this scene with a medium shot of Goku front on. The pose is correct, but the angle is, let's say, different, and I can kinda see why. Toriyama's vision of this scene, as is often the case throughout the manga, showcases a much more imposing and far more complicated angle. Where the anime opted for a straightforward shot that wasn't executed very well due to it falling into the hands of one of the weaker animation directors, Toriyama went for a subtle forced perspective mixed with some really crisp artwork that presented Goku like some sort of angry god looking down on Frieza. But even if we push the art quality aside, I don't think the director made the best choice here. Clearly, one of these angles is superior to the other in terms of storytelling and illustrative quality, and so therefore, in keeping with Daima's commitment to Toriyama's accuracy, I decided to sign myself up and reanimate this one right out of the manga. And what followed was one of the single greatest challenges I've ever faced as an artist. For those of you that don't know, I used to study animation. While I was producing videos back in 2016, I was doing so while also attending art college. However, once YouTube became a viable option as a career for me, I decided to take my chance and hang up my animation hat after only one short year. But that, however, did not stop me from going into this challenge with an undue amount of confidence. But don't worry, it was shattered almost immediately. Right off the bat, trying to get that pose down was extremely tough. This is an angle the anime almost never faithfully adapts, and I can totally see why. Trying to remain faithful to Toriyama's bizarre feature placement, his anatomic philosophy, and how I wanted to frame this in animation required levels of patience I didn't know I had. And what's worse is, by the time I eventually got around to animating the image itself, I encountered let's say a serious problem. Unlike the other artists on this channel, I didn't actually have any animation software to use. For these drawing videos, the only tools I use are my iPad Pro, my Apple Pencil, and the illustration app called Procreate. And that application does not have an animation feature. And worse still, Procreate does have an animation suite, but I don't think I need to show you much more than its 3-star rating on the App Store to explain why that wasn't exactly the ideal solution. Prior to this, I had never really animated on anything other than paper before, and so given this illustration app I was using didn't have any animation features through which I could test to see if my animation was, I don't know, working, did I A, stop using this app without any animation features and switch to paper? B, stop using this app without any animation features and switch to one that does? Or C, keep using the app without any animation features because I was too lazy to switch? It's C, yeah, okay, obviously it's C, I'm an idiot. In case you're not familiar though, because why would you be? In animation, the standard practice is to check the flow of the frames you draw as you produce them. This is to catch and correct any mistakes that may break the illusion of motion you're trying to create here. This has been the practice for almost a century, and I didn't make these checks. Instead, what I chose to do was draw each individual frame like its own unique bespoke image and pray that whatever instincts I thought I had would be enough to make this animation look semi-competent. Thankfully, this shot of Goku doesn't involve much movement of the body, with only his mouth and jaw requiring bespoke frames in order to speak. But what this shot does have is an aura, which is so damn annoying to draw if you don't know how to do it. It has Goku's gi and shoelaces billowing in the wind, and it has Goku's tattered belt flip-flopping in the air. The aura was annoying, but eventually I got it right. The gi and shoes were relatively easy because they barely move at all. But that belt was so frustrating. If you've ever had to spend a solid hour contemplating the physics of a thin fabric blowing in the wind, then consider yourself one of the lucky ones. Eventually, I got to a point where I just said fuck it and insisted on starting the coloring process. Which, by the way, took even longer. This was, without question, the single most annoying step of the entire process, if for no other reason than it took an exorbitant amount of time. To put this into perspective, in order to color and shade all of the frames for this sequence, I needed to stay at my desk coloring for 20 hours. That, coupled with the fact that I needed to upload this video at a specific time during the week, and you have for yourself a recipe for exhaustion. And the worst part is, I don't even know if it'll work. Like I said, I couldn't test this animation, and so all I could really do is hand over my work to a composite artist Mix in the hopes that, in addition to him making it look like Daima, the animation actually looked like it worked. So here it is, my animation of I am the Super Saiyan panel from the manga. How'd I do?
I am the Super Saiyan Son Goku!
In select instances, these visual deviations from Toriyama's manga, in my view, lose something substantial. Take, for example, what Cat Destroyer worked on. His mission this week was to adapt this panel into Daima's format. And look, a picture is indeed worth 1,000 words, but a mangaka's job is to ensure a specific message is being communicated with each of their panels, to remove the guesswork. And at a glance, this might seem like a relatively straightforward shot to adapt faithfully. However, there is an issue. It doesn't fit within the dimensions of a modern anime, which means we have to make our own creative decisions here. In the original anime's case, it decided to substitute this domineering shot of Vegeta for this, I don't know, comparatively less interesting front-on shot that we've seen a million times before. There isn't necessarily anything wrong with it, however, a lot of information is discarded through taking this stripped-down approach. Toriyama chooses these angles, poses, and panels he draws thoughtfully. There's a purpose behind each decision. They tell us something about the encounter. Now, that's not to say the storyboard artist doesn't do this either, but if we look at the page this panel was taken from and the one prior to it, I think we can better understand then why the manga composition is worth retaining if nothing else. This is the scene where Frieza confronts the group of Gohan, Krillin, Vegeta, and Dende for the very first time. With Frieza exclaiming in a big spread, his anger and frustration is evident. He intends on killing each and every one of them. And when we turn the page, we are greeted by an aerial wide shot of the group. This serves the purpose of establishing where everyone is in relation to one another certainly, but it also communicates the story of Vegeta and Frieza here. After witnessing how incensed Frieza has become, everyone in the group loses their composure and places significant distance between themselves and him. Everyone except for Vegeta. He and Frieza are the only two in this frame motionless, and both are of comparable size. This is visual storytelling 101, and so now let's look at what Cat is adapting here. The panel is tall and thin, with both Vegeta and Krillin present. While one could simply shift the composition of the characters closer together to fit within a widescreen frame, as expressed, I'm very keen to keep the spacing the same and introduce a bit of tension. And so I believe a camera pan of some description makes the most sense here. A slow build to Vegeta's eventual expression. And honestly, I think that approach should inform the direction we take with it. When reading this panel, our eye floats from Vegeta's face through each speech bubble and down to Krillin before dashing back up for Frieza's response. However, given that Krillin only serves as a point of contrast to Vegeta in this instance, and Vegeta's confidence is the big payoff here, I would opt for a slow pan upwards, visually communicating Vegeta's growing sense of power and confidence in this exchange. And so, with that faithful direction in mind, coupled with Cat's incredible artwork, what we have is a shot that aligns far more closely with what Toriyama himself both drew and wrote into his story. Next up to readapt is Anime AJ, and I wonder what he'll be drawing. Oh wow, it's Android 18, a woman. Who could have seen that come? I did. I saw it coming. He's a menace to society and needs to be stopped. Anyway, after spending almost the entire video touting the virtues of authenticity and reverence for this source manga, I'm sure many of you might be anticipating something else in that vein, but as you can see, this is quite the departure from the original panel already. As I've established countless times in this video, anime is a whole different animal to that of manga. Not just in the sense of framing limitations, but the pace and flow, the inclusion of sound and voice acting. The two mediums are intrinsically different, and it's important to keep that in mind because some of the very best adaptations are not simply one-to-one recreations of their source. Instead, they take what's there and elevate them through interesting new layouts and expansive action set pieces that just aren't viable in a static medium. Whether it be Jujutsu Kaisen or even the Wano arc of One Piece, their action scenes in particular are astonishing in ways that could only ever be executed in the medium of animation. And that's a good thing. It's something that should be encouraged and explored, and it's what is so often makes for the best received anime. Now, of course, none of us here today are real animators capable of showing that, but I think AJ's changes here show how important even the most basic framing changes can be. The original panel in question is this tall and skinny shot, and while you could just crop it to widescreen, you'd miss a lot of what makes it so striking. Even drawing it as it is and adding a pan wouldn't really capture or convey the initial intent. It would be slow and maybe even kind of awkward. The original anime understood this and changed the angle entirely to be a side-on shot, which is a perfectly valid approach, but maybe not quite for our goal today of reaching Daima's faithful take. And as a result, AJ has instead opted to maintain the original perspective, but with some key differences. It's been canted at an angle for some cool dynamism. The hand has been brought up in the shot to make up for what was lost in the crop. It's all being reformatted in a way that's honestly the most far removed from the original in this video, but is also arguably the most suited to a widescreen anime format. With the flowing hair, the intense speed lines, and awesome compositing from Mix, the results are different, but I think just as impactful as the original panel was. And more than that, I think it goes a long way in showing that copy and pasting panels for layouts does not make for a compelling anime adaptation. But storyboarding is not the only place anime can differ from its source, and to demonstrate that, we need Trev. With a scene as good as Gohan's Super Saiyan 2 reveal, it might not have been in the minds of many of you for this video, but I think this one offers us a chance to touch on something a little different: direction. In Daima's first episode's recap, much of it was made up of big reveals and panning shots that are kept largely one-to-one with the source manga, even down to the tone. Which, I mean, hey, that's super cool for a short manga-accurate recap. But of course, if an entire series was replicating a manga identically, that's going to lead to a rather boring anime, both visually and directorially. So on that front, I think the original Z anime did a lot of fantastic work in adapting Gohan's transformation scene, rather than just copying it. The paneling in the manga is without a doubt fantastic, but plays more as a dramatically sudden shift. Gohan just snaps, then 2 pages later, most of which are just reaction shots, the transformation is complete, a total violent turn. The Z anime then, by contrast, takes a lot of directorial liberties to elevate the scene to new heights, not just with the addition of the bird motif, but by shifting around a lot of events to play into the episode structure. Episode 184 ends with 2 shots that are loosely based on the manga, but in actuality are wholly new. Then the following episode rewinds a bit and tackles the transformation all over again, this time with direction and composition much closer to the manga. And well, I think you would be pretty hard pressed to be so purist as to say, oh, the anime ruined Gohan's transformation by changing things from the manga, and you would be hard pressed because it's a TV show, not a manga. It took chances with its medium to elevate the scene, play to the epic insert song, and instill additional depth without outright changing anything substantial, which honestly is the mark of a wonderful adaptation. Now, obviously, the reveal Trev is drawing here is one-to-one with the manga, not the anime, which is the exact opposite of what I just said, but in the context of Daima's little flashbacks, I think going back and imagining the Super Saiyan 2 reveal more identically to the manga is totally fine. If not, really cool. It's just important to remember that identical recreation isn't always the answer. Anime is quite different to manga, and as a result must wield its medium carefully as a weapon, knowing when to hold a sturdy stance by simply bringing the manga to life, and knowing when to go on the offensive and strike with creative direction that leverages its format to achieve unseen heights. Oh, also, before we show you the finished result of Trev's toil, I want to shout out our audio engineer Tyson. All of the audio, dialogue, and music applied to these cuts of animation were added and selected by him. For the keen-eared amongst you, you might also notice that all of the music selection thus far has been in line with that used in Daima. And for those of you interested in learning more about the complex and fascinating nature of Daima's musical makeup, we uploaded a video last week sharing all of the juicy educational details. But enough preamble, let's see what Trev and her team put together for Gohan's transformation, adapted one-to-one with Toriyama's manga. In the end, thinking about how a Dragon Ball remake might tackle things has been a really interesting exercise, and it's definitely something I'd love to see approached later on down the line. I think if there's anything this video has highlighted for me, however, it's that whenever it does happen, I hope it manages to strike a great balance between faithful adaptation and awesome departures. Some of the best moments of the original Z anime were starkly different, and yet its worst could be different also. The same goes for when it was faithful. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's just bad. It's about working out what suits the moments best, and I'd love to hear in the comments what you thought it succeeded and failed at, and what you'd love to see changed. Daima has so far been a stunningly gorgeous series for all of us to enjoy, and that 10-minute recap was cool enough to inspire this whole video. And we here on the channel are loving it so much that we even started our very own podcast to review each individual episode as it comes out. It's called Totally Not a Podcast, available on YouTube, Apple Music, Amazon Music, and Spotify right now. At this point, you guys are pretty much used to me not sharing my thoughts on a new Dragon Ball film or TV series until many months following its release, or in the case of Dragon Ball Super Broly, 1 year after its release. Sorry about that again. But with this new livestream and podcast format, you can hear my comprehensive thoughts on each episode right after you've seen it. We go live on this channel, Totally Not Mark, at 2 p.m. Central every Friday, and if you can't make that live show, all of the podcasts are uploaded to all of the usual podcast platforms, including our brand new dedicated podcast YouTube channel, Totally Not a Podcast, every Tuesday. Links are in the description. But if you don't want to miss our coverage of Dragon Ball Daima, be sure to subscribe to that new channel. We can't wait to see you there for the rest of Dragon Ball Daima, and after that, who knows what other wonderful anime we might be covering. Heck, you can even leave your suggestions in the comments underneath those podcast uploads on that channel. For now, that'll do it for this week. As always, I've been Totally Not Mark. We really hope you enjoyed this video. It was a lot of work, and thank you all so much for watching.